Frontier opening bell. The trading day and the first Monday of the new week in the month of August. Welcome my panelists, Ali Kansachu, CEO and founder of Rich Frontiers Management. Thank you. Good morning, Ali.
It's a pleasure. Good to see you as always.
Pleasure always to have Onyeka Ijeoma of Ativa Capital also with us on the show this morning, the industrial goods analyst.
Thanks for having me, Barton.
I appreciate your time. Let's look at the African markets. Basically, a bit of a mixed Friday. Nigeria's weekly came in at 0.35%. Ivorian market was about 0.2% with the conclusion of the EFDB's annual meeting at the Ivorian capital, Abidjan, on Friday. President Adesina got a re-election. Today is his inauguration at 11 o'clock Nigerian time. Egyptian top 30 index down 0.08% on Friday. Kenya was 1.08%. South Africa fell sharply, 1.43%. Within the Kenyan marketplace, talking about East African market, insurer Jubilee Holdings says its net profit was flat for the period. First 6 months of the year on the virus. Reporting during the virus period is still ongoing. In Uganda, DFCU is a commercial bank. Loans up 26.8%. Loan charge about 8 plus in Uganda shillings. Profit after tax down 6 billion shillings. In Rwanda, I&M Bank, interest income went up, profits about 2.17 billion Rwandan francs. Non-performing ratio, loan ratio 2.54%. Ethiopia, the news over the weekend on Reuters says there's no united draft deal on the Renaissance Dam negotiations. This looks like one pretty bad news. We're back to square zero as it was square one on the Renaissance Dam on the Nile River. Ali.
So let me start with the Nairobi Securities Exchange. We've been having a huge number of half-year and some full-year results. You were referencing Jubilee, which is very much a blue-chip insurance company here in Nairobi. And frankly, a flat half-year result is quite bullish because everyone has been under significant pressure. Insurers have been suffering lower investment income. They've managed to navigate the insurance risk around COVID, but the markets have been down. Jubilee is a very interesting insurance company, very solid, very conservatively managed, and also heavily invested also in the private equity space. In the Bujagali Dam in Uganda is a flagship investment. There are a bunch of these. And the balance sheet is very rich, so they have the ability to smooth earnings. When there are tough times, they'll take an improved mark to market on some of these private holdings. So very well managed, looks attractive to me on any reverses, and significantly outperforming all its peers. Britam saw a big loss and others. So this is a premier blue chip stock at the Nairobi Stock Exchange. DFCU, this is the bank in Uganda where CDC, I think, had a very big holding for quite a while. Grew the loan book 26.8%. I'm not sure where they grew it, but that's an interesting fact. As expected, it's been a tough environment for banks, notwithstanding, even in Uganda. I&M Bank, only 2.54% NPL ratio in Rwanda. That's a real outlier and noteworthy. I&M is a tier 1 bank here in Kenya, reported good earnings as well. And they have operation in Rwanda. They have a holding company in Mauritius, and very well managed and growing quite fast. Ethiopia, no unified draft deal. We also had the news that the Americans were withholding, I think, over $100 million because of the failure to reach some kind of agreement, unified draft deal in the matter of the dam. So we have that volatility in its politics. Ethiopia has been an ally both of China and the United States, but obviously in this case, the Americans are putting quite a bit of pressure on Prime Minister Abiy's office. They have said over the weekend that nothing has been communicated to them, so they don't know what the status is, but we are all aware that the Americans have withheld about $130 million of aid, which was due to them.
That's the development that everyone is watching very keenly, whether this Nile Dam project will be bogged down with geopolitics regionally and with global interests. But I think it's in Africa's interest to see this resolution once and for all and get a major energy plant in that the Horn of Africa's corridor, which could be a major boost to Ethiopia, Burundi, Sudan, and others along that corridor. I think it's in anyone's interest on this side of the North Africa and the other side of the Horn of Africa, Djibouti, and all of that. It's a game changer project. You just have to resolve that politically speaking. I hope the international folks will allow them to resolve things, putting external pressures into it. In Nigeria, it's the FX story that is the big story. By the way, today the central bank is restarting FX sales to Bureau de Change operating starting today, and on Wednesday it's going to be twice a week. The central bank also rolled out guidelines for licensing what is called the payment service banks. 3 banks had been licensed. 3 of these operators are licensed: Hope, FX, PSB, Money, PSB, and 9 PSB. Initial capital layout is 5 billion naira for payment service banks. Is the new beginning. The central bank says they want financial inclusion to be deepened further in 2020. What all of this mean is anyone's guess. Angola is joining the Global Extractive Transparency Agency, the ETI. Nigeria's NNPC made a similar announcement just 2 weeks ago. This brings the number of countries joining the Global Extractive Transparency Initiative. The number is heading to 70, 65 as at the time Nigeria State Oil Corporation joined. Meantime, Lake Oil Limited, a private oil company, says he'll be needing about $100 million before he could start drilling one of his oil fields in Nigeria. IJ, the currency story is the biggest story on Nigeria market streets right now, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely it is. The CBN has timed it to sort of coincide with the reopening of the international airport, basically to support international travel. So this is going to be a boost for the airlines, as travelers who might have been put off from traveling due to scarcity of FX might be able to source some FX. The only problem now is that the amount that the CBN is allocating to the BDCs has halved from around 20,000 USD to around 10,000 USD. Which is a significant cut. But then it's still an improvement from the $0 they were receiving. They've been receiving for a few weeks now. It's very important. It's very important that the CBN resume this FX sales to the BDC. It's definitely going to have an impact on the cash reserves now. I think people are just going to be watching to see how sustainable this is for the CBN right now as international air travel comes in, the demand for USD comes in, and the CBN continues to push out USD to the BDC.
So we got our Q2 GDP. IJ, we got our Q2 GDP in the water, a negative 6.10%, but the stock market seemed to ignore that from what we saw last week, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because it was sort of expected. We had expected this. We had expected a contraction in the second quarter. Maybe not as much, but in terms of the size of the drop, it wasn't. It was more than the market expected, but the difference was not that significant because when you look at the forecast of all the major banks, it differed significantly from an expectation of 1% contraction, to expectations of 8% contraction in the second quarter. There was no consensus, and it was largely due to the significant uncertainty that we saw both in domestic markets and in the global space. The investors had already priced in a significant contraction anyways. This was not the story to move the market. What investors are more interested in is how is the country moving forward. What are we doing to reduce the impacts, the contraction for the rest of the year? The budget office came out last week Friday, to say that they expect another contraction in Q3, and albeit significantly less than we saw in the second quarter, but they expect another contraction in Q3. So we'll officially be entering a recession. What is the roadmap to exiting this for us? It's not, because Nigeria's case is somewhat different from the global, from what's obtainable in the global field, because we are hit from a lot of different sides. From the oil space to the impact of the pandemic. We are very vulnerable right now, and investors want to see what our roadmap is, and that's what's important, for the equities market.
Okay, great. Ali, quickly, this is Angola. You have a word on Angola's journey, the extractive industry, transparency industry, even with Sonangol in some messy waters over the daughter of the former president.
So essentially,
this is a way of cleaning up.
This is a way of cleaning up. I mean, the president took his time, but now he's moving with some authority. He's, the president's son, who was running the Sovereign Wealth Fund, has been put in prison. Isabel dos Santos, who was the billionaire princess type figure in Angola, was dislodged from Sonangol. She's had to disgorge a lot of her assets in Angola. And I think essentially what this is a tidying up process. More importantly for Angola, we got the negotiation with China. There's a huge debt pile that's owed to China. Everyone is looking at that development very keenly to see how China handles that Angolan debt. But overall, I think President Lorenzo...
You have the G20 DSSI as well.
That's right. So you've got that that complexity around it, which is...
So perhaps to pacify the G20 folks, join the EITI, transparency, and say, well, look, okay, you got to give something, because the China deal is not going to be enough to get Angola out of his financial problems.
Correct. I think you're completely correct. It's a quid pro quo. It speaks to the reform credentials of the president. It speaks to turning the page. And I think that's important messaging from the presidential palace in Luanda. Look, Angola's debt to GDP is over 100%. A lot of the loans are collateralized loans against oil, very opaque. David Malpass of the World Bank has been saying, you've got to tell us what is in these loan documents. So I think we're moving gradually to that point. And I think Angola is an improving story, but currency at a record low last week. I saw the Kwanza. It's tough. It's really tough.
Last week, Angola also came out with this 2020-2025 new energy roadmap.
Yes, they did. I mean, this is all part and parcel. I think the president's been in power for over a year. He's now beginning to show his hand. There's a lot of oil there in Angola. There's a lot of potential there. It's not just about oil. They've got agricultural opportunities. They've just got to get away from that resource curse the trap into which they fell. And I think they've got to get away from that entire family type governance structure that was there for quite a long time.
I agree with you. It's going to be a whole lot of unpacking what the De Santos administration did for so many years in Angola, and try to set the country on a completely new political and economic course on the west side and on the east side of the planet. Thank you. Look at the Southern African market quickly. The GSC, as you saw, finished off in the negative territory last week, but the earnings are still coming through from that jurisdiction as well. Discovery, a big insurer in SA, sees its earnings, headline earnings per share down 90% to 100. That looks like wipeout. Northern Platinum, of course, it's been a very good year for metal prices and miners, by the way. So Steinhoff, I say, has a whole lot of cleaning up to do, but says he's looking at cheaper clothing sales to make a comeback within the pandemic. The South African bank says demand for government virus loans are waning, and the total payouts may just be as little as $1.5 billion by the beginning of next year. Glencore is telling the authorities in Zambia, the Lungu's administration, you can take it all. We're ready to let go 73.1% of our holdings. We don't want to be a minority shareholder. Ali, this is getting a bit it's getting a little bit more interesting, let me put it that way, between Glencore and the host country, Zambia.
Yeah, I think President Lungu is deluded in terms of the strength of his hand. And I think, you know, since removing a very credible central bank governor, the constant bullying of these big companies like Glencore, I think ultimately Zambia needs Glencore more than Glencore probably needs Zambia. And I think that's what the message Glencore is sending to President Lungu. This is a high stakes poker game, and with $1 billion or less in reserves, a currency which is in free fall, it strikes me as President Lungu is one bold player. He's the guy, I wouldn't want to give him any money to play at roulette, in my view, because it would just get gambled. So I think it's a tricky situation. I think President Lungu has a very interesting perspective on things, and I'm just not convinced about the strategy that the executive is pursuing in Lusaka. And I think we're seeing that, whether it's in the removal of the central bank governor, we're seeing it in the currency, and we're seeing it with Glencore just saying, look, you take it all, buddy, we'll move on type attitude. Going to South Africa quickly, the Rand had its fourth best up move ever last week, by the way. There was a very dramatic move, I just mentioned that. To go into the detail of what you were talking about, Discovery, that's insurance. Discovery is focused on health. And that's why I think that explains that quite dramatic slide. Platinum, we know this is a sweet spot for investors. You can buy these software companies, or you can look at these metals companies, because they have throwing off free cash with the higher price range that we're seeing, whether it's platinum, silver, or gold. Steinhoff, interesting, going towards the mass market, tilting the business towards cheaper clothing. I haven't looked at their online presence, but my takeaway is so much is moving online. The real competitive edge is for companies who understand online and the delivery around that, the logistics, which is the complicated part of the equation in Africa. You see that in many of these online businesses. But Steinhoff, let's see how they get on with that. I was surprised that demand for virus loans was waning. That's an interesting signal. It's telling me that companies in South Africa don't want to load the balance sheet with more debt and are prepared to sort of fight their way through this very, very tricky and turbulent time.
But it's going to be interesting to see South Africa's GDP numbers out on the 8th of September, which is just about, if you discount the weekend, it's just about a week from now, Ijoma, isn't it? This most advanced economy is forecast that the second quarter GDP will fall as much as 40%. What are your thoughts about South Africa, Nigel?
Sometimes I actually feel like it's a lot of these forecasts might be a little too bearish. We're seeing data from some of we're seeing their business confidence index, we're seeing their consumer confidence index, we're seeing data from some of the major companies in South Africa, looking as if there is some progression. I mean, numbers are still down, numbers are still weak due to the pandemic and due to the strong stance the South African government took when the pandemic started. However, we are seeing some recovery, and the huge expectation, the huge GDP drop expectation is quite surprising from our end. We still expect a contraction in the third quarter for South Africa, though. We don't expect it to fall out as much. I don't recall the number at the moment, so I'm trying not to mention any numbers, but we are definitely not expecting as much as much as you know.
What's your take on the Nigerian markets this week? Where do you think? Do you think we are done with the end of month adjustments? Let's come back up. Do you think we're done with end month adjustments? What's your outlook? The PMI we expect in the next today, tomorrow. What else is there on the cards for Nigeria aside the FX and the exchange rate?
I mean, even the FX is not going to significantly. The FX sale is not going to significantly impact this thing. It's not going to significantly impact the market because what is the main change that we're going to see in the market is when foreign investors are more comfortable with bringing in investments into the market when they see significant liquidity in the market. We saw this in 2017 when we had the last recession and the last FX crisis. What really shifted market sentiment was currency liquidity. The sales to the BDCs, while important, especially for international air travel, is not going to fulfill the size of the equity market obligations, and I don't think that is going to have a significant impact. The market is going to trade in the way it has been trading for a while. It's going to be tepid. People are going to take short-term gains. They're going to come in for short-term gains. There are still some very fundamentally sound stocks. There are still stocks that are most of these stocks are very attractively priced. Investors are watching them. However, many investors are still worried about the FX situation, and they will probably be only to play in short term. That's what we're seeing in the Nigerian market. I think one interesting thing though in the Nigerian market is the payment service bank scheme. We are seeing the CBN actually follow through on its plan to drive financial inclusion upwards. We know they had a target for 80% financial inclusion in 2020. They're somewhere around 60%, if I'm just over 60%. We haven't hit that goal, and CBN is following through from a plan that it released sometime in 2018. They've licensed 3 banks now. No credit risk, no FX, no foreign currency, assets or transactions. Really just high volume, low value transactions, mostly targeting the payment service banks is definitely just geared towards improving financial inclusion, especially at those places where we naturally see some financial exclusion. This is going to be very important for Nigeria in a lot of ways, especially in terms of capital raising, where we tend to see that there's a lot of money in the system, but we don't get to raise it because a lot of these people are not part of some of these people are not part of the financial system in Nigeria. So that is a positive.
Okay, great. We'll see how it goes. It's early days yet. Let's see what this new branch of financial services with the PSBs. Let's see how it goes. Ali, let's look at the North African market very quickly as we start to round off the show. Algeria is building a third solar power plant at a disputed city, Dakhla. Meantime, the number of billionaires in the Middle East and North Africa has increased. Well, the number hasn't really increased, but they've increased their position by about $10 billion US dollars, even during the pandemic, by the way. Ali.
Yeah, so just to touch on the Algeria solar story, we've seen a big push into solar in that Middle East area, Middle East Maghreb area. UAE, I think, have put together the largest solar factory ever seen. And Algeria, typically an oil and gas story, it's interesting to see them doing that as well. Egypt, Canada, that I think that's probably a lot of imports of food from Canada, in my view. Libya, I saw that they've actually uplifted some oil from Brega, which was a port which was closed for a long time over the weekend. That was a story I saw on Bloomberg. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but you know, as we all know, the Libyan situation is on a knife edge, and given some of the talk I saw out of Greece and Turkey over the weekend, where Turkey was talking of invading some Greek islands, and they're both on opposing sides in Libya. I think Libya will remain on that knife edge I was describing. Billionaires, this is a story all over the world. The rich are getting richer. You know, this inequality story. All this quantitative easing is not helping. It's just making the rich richer, and the poor are struggling. And I think that story is just confirming a global trend.
I agree with you. I agree with you. The more trillions you put it into the system, into the machine, it depends on who has the biggest pipeline, by the way, because once you put it in, the guys with the bigger pipeline, existing pipeline, will get a lion's share of it. Those with the smaller pipes will definitely get the trickles, as the case may be. So it's just reinforcing what we already know about the inequality. The World Bank, the IMF, we keep talking about it, the World Economic Forum, but it looks like that's the way the world is made, by the way. So thank you so much. Let's give you a chance to get on with today's business and markets. Thank you so much, Ali Kansachi of Rich Frontiers Management. Thank you, and Ijama Onyeka from Vetiva Capital. See you again tomorrow. Bye for now.